Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is co-host Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. We have a special guest today,
Again,
a fellow
yes.
Texan,
And
he's a fellow traveler when it comes to defending liberty and having openness in government. His name is Brian McGlinchey. He is the founder of a very significant website called 28pages.org, something he started just a couple years ago. But Brian also has a similarity not only in our beliefs, but he's also from Pennsylvania originally. He was from the eastern part of the state, and I was from the western part of Pennsylvania. And then when Uncle Sam was anxious to get me, I ended up in San Antonio, and Brian, I understand, lives in San Antonio now. He has been in the military too, but I don't know whether the military took him to San Antonio or not. But anyway, Brian, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's a great pleasure to be with both of you.
And good. And Daniel?
No, Brian, I just want to echo Dr. Paul's thanks for joining us. It's very exciting. When the 15th hit and the pages were released, you're the first person I thought of. It's terrific. But before we go on with the show, I'd actually like to make a little bit of news. And I would like to announce to our audience that Brian is going to be joining the Ron Paul Institute as a speaker at our September 10th conference, and we are just delighted to have him. He's got a great news story to tell how we really can make a difference. So look at the ronpaulinstitute.org website. You can find out more about coming to this very exciting conference.
Very good. Brian, I want to start off by having you talk a little bit about how you got started and interested in this subject, very important one. And you probably won't brag on yourself, but we will, about how much you accomplished by having your own website and stirring up interest in the 28 pages, because within 2 years, you were working on 2 years and you got the pages released, so that's pretty good. When you mentioned that you heard Thomas Massey speak, or you knew about him, and he got your interest in it. Of course, Walter Jones was very much involved. Prior to that, did you have some interest, but needed a little bump, a little inspiration? Because you did go to work on this in 2014, and you've had a lot of people look at your website, and I know it has played a significant role in putting pressure on our government to do what they should have never done in the first place, and that is prevent us from knowing the truth.
Yes, I had an intense interest in foreign policy and in politics, and like so many people who have been influenced by you, Dr. Paul, I was one of those people who was struggling to find out, what can I do, what could my niche be? And that was going on for quite a while when I did see press conference video of Congressman Thomas Massey, someone I deeply respected, describing these 28 pages. And that motivated me to say, this is my opportunity. I looked in there. I saw that there was no website out there already that was addressing this and providing good, well-sourced, reliable information on this and helping to channel activism. So I just decided one summer night in 2014 to leap in and create 28pages.org.
And Brian, I'm sure you came up with some resistance at first, with people wanting to write you off as some sort of a truther or some kind of a kook or something. And I remember we talked about this when you and I met, I guess about a year or so ago in Austin when Dr. Paul spoke. But you definitely did not have that in mind, and I think you've been able to dispel those kinds of ideas. Indeed,
early on, many times people would say, are you a conspiracy theorist? And I would say, no, I'm a transparency theorist. I have a theory that in this republic of ours, where government is under the domain of the people, that the people should have access to important information like this, particularly where it regards these life and death decisions on a mass scale involving our policies at home, and also the effect that these policies have had on our liberties here at home and abroad.
A lot of people over the years, after I've visited with them, will be excited about promoting liberty, and they'll want me to be very precise. They'll ask me a question at the end of a speech and say, what do you want me to do? And I always respond, do what you want to do, be creative. And I think you have really done it, because nobody gave you the instruction on what to do. You had an idea, you just went and did it. You played a significant role in this, and it should give you a lot of satisfaction on this. But to me, the real issue on how we change things in government, I don't have a lot of confidence in the political process in the narrow sense. Sometimes elections are just done for deceptions, and if you have a government report, it's for deception. But public opinion still is very valuable. And when I think back to the time in the 60s, during the Vietnam War, ultimately it was only public opinion that finally woke up the country and got us out of Vietnam. And this is what happened here. People knew about not having the full report back in 2002, and we've been looking for the full report. But finally, individuals like you and others and a few members of Congress have done something to change public opinion. So I really want to compliment you on that, because you participated in that and encourage others to do the very same thing.
Yes, and one of the things that I had learned from you was this notion of coalitions to get things accomplished. One of the things that struck me as I became involved in this and started creating a social media presence and that type of thing is the diversity of the followership of people who wanted these 28 pages out. One moment I'd get a follower who was a never Trump person, the next one would be a diehard Trump person. It was progressive liberals, it was neoconservatives, everybody wanted these 28 pages out. And so just taking advantage of the fact that transparency is something that really all people have an interest in, so that we can all make an informed decision and then have that next round of debate about what these pages mean.
Yeah, that's great. If you could now give us a little bit of insight, you put this together, you put this momentum together, maybe a little bit on the nuts and bolts of what you actually did, how you put it together. I think people would be interested in hearing that.
Yes, well, first, as far as my accomplishment, I'd like to make sure that credit is definitely afforded to 9/11 families and former Senator Bob Graham, Walter Jones, and Congressman Massey and Lynch. As far as putting it together, my first goal was to create well-sourced information that people could rely on, and not only just your citizens, but also journalists, that it would be a resource to them, so that if they started to have a look at this story, they could very quickly become educated on it and be able to report on it themselves. So it was launching the website, and you marvel in this age at how affordable it is to reach out and communicate with people. 28pages.org has been visited by people in 190 countries for the cost of about $20 a year for the website. So creating the website and then creating a social media presence and then starting to reach out to journalists to make myself a resource to them as well, and just keeping at it on a daily basis.
Yeah. Brian, a lot of people speculated about what we didn't know. We didn't have these 28 pages. There were a lot of leaks and a lot of assumptions. Was there any one surprise that you got from the release of these pages, or do you think you just found out exactly what most of us suspected? What was your reaction from this? Was this a big coup that we really got to the bottom of this, or do we still have a ways to go to get the final answers?
We definitely have a ways to go. These 28 pages really just prompt many, many more questions this next round of inquiry. I will say one thing that struck me was that we knew that Prince Bandar, who was the Saudi ambassador to the United States leading up to 9/11 and shortly after 9/11, and a close confidant and friend of George W. Bush, we knew that money had flown from his wife in the form of cashier's checks and ended up in the hands of a couple of handlers of future 9/11 hijackers based in San Diego. What the 28 pages revealed was that there was also a direct payment from Prince Bandar to one of those handlers of $15,000.
That's incredible. The other thing that jumped out at me, Brian, is the FBI and CIA being blocked from investigating this possible Saudi connection from before 9/11 onward. And it sounds to me like it was a political thing, a stand-down order. These are our allies, don't bother with them. That doesn't sound very helpful for national security.
Yes, indeed. That phenomenon I learned happened well before 9/11 and even continued after it. And as these 20 pages were coming out, figures in the intelligence community and the government were quick to say that, hey, these pages were written before the 9/11 Commission. Look to the 9/11 Commission as the authority. However, we know that the Bush administration was blocking the declassification of documents pointing towards Saudi Arabia, not cooperating, that even in the waning days of the 9/11 Commission, there was a late-night editing session where the executive director of the commission was editing the Saudi section to remove information that was incriminating. So we definitely don't have the final word on this, and there's been a widespread pattern of obstructionism by both the Bush and the Obama administrations as it relates to implicating Saudi Arabia.
You know, there was one phrase in one of the reports that showed that the commission had already reported that, yes, the government wasn't perfect, but they, because they were encouraging these courses in Saudi Arabia to radicalize young Saudis. At the same time, it was the CIA that was involved with this a little bit. But the Saudi government took the position that they wanted these pages released. There's nothing there. And even afterwards, they pretended there's nothing there. Give me your opinion about that. Why did they claim that? They had to do it for political purpose. Do you think they believed that it would never happen? Because I don't think this has helped the Saudi government in any way.
No. Those claims were first made way back in 2003 when these pages were first classified. And that was during the Bush administration. I really feel like that was a call for the release of the 20 pages by the Saudis that was made with a quiet assurance that they would not be declassified. And then they were silent on that. This latest surge for the declassification started in 2013. They were very quiet and were not reiterating that call until these last few months where it looked like it was again inevitable. And I think, like a defense attorney wanting to get the evidence out, on their terms, they were motivated to go ahead and ask for the 20 pages and say, bring them out. We want them out too.
Yeah, but didn't they also threaten to divest all of their holdings of U.S. or sell all of their U.S. assets or something like this? I think so. They went back and forth, and I wonder how much within the Saudi family there's maneuvering because if Bandar's out, somebody else is in, But Brian, the other thing that was interesting in this, and I don't want to get too far into the trees, but it is fascinating. This al-Bayoumi fellow seems to be really the direct connection between the Saudi government and the hijackers, kind of the go-between. To me, that seemed almost like the smoking gun.
Yes, by all indications, this Omar al-Bayoumi was a Saudi intelligence asset living in San Diego. He had a no-show job for a Saudi-affiliated aviation company, literally only showed up once and was collecting a paycheck. His income mysteriously increased substantially at the same time that the two future 9/11 hijackers had arrived in San Diego. So, I mean, like you said, it may not be a smoking gun, but there is just so much smoke pouring out of Southern California where it relates to potential links to the Saudi kingdom.
And I mentioned already that I'm very pleased with public opinion when we motivate it, and we're talking about how public opinion helped to get this. But the real tragedy is this is probably minuscule compared to what the government keeps from us. Because when you start to look at what Edward Snowden has revealed, this is a culture of secretism away from the people. Instead of the government protecting our privacy, they protect their secrecy. So our job is never ending. And I think the goal ultimately has to be, and this contributes to it, is we need this revelation. We need the people stirred up. We need a public opinion before they get us into these problems. And it's the fact that we were over there in Saudi Arabia actually precipitating some of the blowback that came because we had troops in Saudi Arabia, and that was one of the excuses for 9/11. So yes, these are consequences, and we have to do our best in order to dissect this. But I'm also anxious, and that's what the Institute for Peace and Prosperity and our conference is all about, is try to get people to preempt this, to do the right thing first, not wait and not be complacent and say, oh yeah, we need another war, well, let's go into Syria, let's go into Ukraine or wherever because, the bad guys are over there. But we need to look at this rather than waiting. This was a hard job, just getting 28 pages. We probably need, 28,000 pages or more, but we need policy changes, and that's why I think your work has been so significant.
Yeah, and I think one of the scandals within this scandal is the decision to classify these back into. And you think about the time frame of that. This investigation into 9/11 happened in 2002, and then the debate between the White House and the congressional staff on how much could be released was going on through early 2003. So we know it was happening in early 2003. The run up to war in Iraq. Meanwhile, 28 pages that point many, many fingers at Saudi Arabia are hidden from the American people, because obviously that would distract from the narrative that was being used at the time.
That's a great point, Brian, and I hadn't really thought of it that way, but that makes perfect sense. This is why you don't want to have this released then, because everyone is talking about Iraq. We got to take out Iraq. Don't you dare release this information that takes the attention to Saudis, good friends of the Bush family, which actually brings me to my question, in which is unsaid so far, but former President George W. Bush does not come out of this smelling like a rose. Maybe that's why he's been hiding so much.
Yeah, this should be a large black mark on his administration. One thing that's been disappointing in the coverage of this 28 pages coming out is I haven't seen any article where somebody said, we reached out to the Bush administration for comment and there was none. I mean, nobody seems to even be focusing on that question, but I certainly will at the 28pages.org blog in these coming days about that angle of this. Because as you look through it, and I'm sure you felt the same way, it confirms everything Congressman Walter Jones had said all along, that, hey, there is nothing in here that would jeopardize national security. It's all about the Bush administration and its relationship with Saudi Arabia.
You know, we suspected that this would reveal something about Saudi Arabia. It has done this. But has there been anything in the release of those papers that you found that would invite an investigation or an assumption that maybe other countries were involved? But do you think this is all involved United States policy, 9/11, and Saudi Arabia? But are there any suggestions there that should be followed up to find out if any other officials in different governments had some effect on this decision?
I hadn't discerned that from the 28 pages, but there's just so much more to investigate. You talked about how we could use 28,000 pages. Well, there's 80,000 pages of documents right now in Florida are being reviewed by a federal judge for declassification. They were FBI files that Senator Bob Graham, who co-chaired the inquiry into 9/11, didn't even know about and found out from investigative reporters years later. And some of these relate to the mysterious disappearance from Florida of a wealthy Saudi family that suddenly left about 2 weeks before 9/11, left cars in the driveway, clothing on the hanger, clothing in the dryer, and in a community that was visited by Muhammad Atta and others, and kept from us.
Wow. That almost sends chills up your spine. Well, but Brian, I wonder now you've got 28pages.org. Now it's 80,000pages.org. What are your plans? Are you still you're still dealing with this, obviously, but are you looking toward the future?
I am. In the immediate coming weeks and months, definitely will be continuing to follow up on this issue and working probably to help support the passage of JASTA, Justice Against Sponsorship of Terrorism Act, which would lower the sovereign immunity hurdle and allow 9/11 families to sue the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Much of what we find out, another means of declassification of transparency is our court system through the discovery process, and I think that could go a long way towards advancing that. And advancing justice for those 9/11 families. And beyond that, I might be circling back into that pattern I was in a couple of years ago, where I was wondering what is my next move for the cause of liberty. But it'll definitely be there's definitely a journey that's not going to stop with 28pages.org.
Fantastic.
Okay, Brian, I want to thank you very much for being with us today, and I am sure you're going to build our audience in September in D.C. area, because you'll be one of our speakers, and I'm sure we'll be discussing that issue more. But thank you very much for being here.
Great to be with both of you.
Very good. And I want to thank our audience today for joining us, because I consider this very, very important, because this is one where we can say there's been a modest success. And individuals did this. One individual, Brian, got together with others and put this website up. And others were struggling, and there was a momentum, and they changed the sentiment, enough pressure to make our government cave in. Now, if Obama wanted to do this early on, he would have done it 8 years ago. He could have. But they waited until the public pressure was strong enough, because this did deal with a so-called ally of ours that we could not offend. But it's been done, and there's been no threat to our national security. They always use that we're doing something that will hurt our national security, and therefore the people can't know. I think what is a real threat to our national security is when the people are denied the truth. And that is the reason why what Brian has done in this 28 pages.org has been so fantastic, and he's going to continue to work in this area, and the American people do. And like I said, we should work for prevention and not have to struggle so hard to find out the truth. Just think of if the truth had been told or revealed, even though it was known prior to the war in Iraq, just think of the tragedy that would have been prevented. And we're still struggling with that. And we're still there. It's still complicated. It's still costing us money. And we're no further off. And the argument of the opposition said, well, we need more troops over there. Sort of like some people who still would go back. Well, we have to finish the war in Vietnam. We didn't have enough troops. 500,000 wasn't enough. But no, what we need is a little common sense in our foreign policy. And that is our goal. And I am so pleased that we were able to bring you this information about 28 pages. And this effort is going to continue, and the Institute for Peace and Prosperity will be working diligently on projects of this sort. I want to thank everybody today for tuning in to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.